All right, good morning, everybody. I'll be leading the readings for a few more days on the topic of the 5 hindrances. So, Sampanno touched on a lot of the important points and read a lot of the essential suttas on the topic of the 5 hindrances, but I'll kind of be talking about them from different angles, kind of reiterating many of the same themes, but if you look through the suttas, the Buddha discusses important Dhamma teachings such as the hindrances from many different perspectives and how they function and form a condition and a critical part of the path. And in the case of the hindrances, in terms of overcoming them to develop the higher mind. So I'll be reading from a few teachings, maybe from the Digha Nikaya and the Anguttara Nikaya, as well as from a book by Bhante Gunaratana, called The Path of Serenity and Insight, which has a whole chapter on the overcoming of the hindrances, as well as from The Wings to Awakening by Ajahn Jeff. So first I'll start with a sutta in the Digha Nikaya. This is just a section from the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, which is an account of the Buddha's last few months of his life before his parinibbana, and it's sort of spoken in a narrative form, a long sort of narrative of all the different places he went to, the teachings he gave, the different sort of interactions he had with people before his final liberation. And in this part of the sutta, Venerable Sariputta comes to him, and it may be the last time Venerable Sariputta paid respects to the Buddha, I'm not sure. But he comes to see the Buddha, and he doesn't ask him a question, but he sort of makes this grand statement that the Buddha calls a lion's roar regarding the Buddha and his enlightenment and the nature of the enlightenment of all Buddhas. And it's a nice simile, and the 5 hindrances sort of feature prominently in the presentation that Sariputta gives of what exactly the Buddha's enlightenment, how it occurred, and what is the nature of the path to there. So I'll just read a little bit from that. So this is Mahaparinibbana Sutta, I think it's section 2. Then the Venerable Sariputta came to see the Lord, saluted him, sat down to one side and said, "It is clear to me, Lord, that there never has been, will be, or is now another ascetic or Brahmin who is better or more enlightened than the Lord. You have spoken boldly with the bull's voice, Sariputta. You have roared the lion's roar of certainty. How is this? Have all the Arahant Buddhas of the past appeared to you? And were the minds of all those lords open to you so as to say, these lords were of such virtue, such was their teaching, such their wisdom, such their way, such their liberation? No, Lord. And have you perceived all the Arahant Buddhas who will appear in the future? No, Lord. Well then, Sariputta, you know me as the Arahant Buddha, and do you know the Lord is of such virtue, such is his teaching, such his wisdom, such his way, such his liberation? No, Lord. So, Sariputta, you do not have knowledge of the minds of the Buddhas of the past, the present, or the future. Thus, Sariputta, have you not spoken boldly with a bull's voice and roared the lion's roar of certainty with your declaration? So the Buddha is kind of saying, well, how can you know this if you don't have knowledge of the minds of Buddhas past, present, and future? Sariputta says, Lord, the minds of the Arahant Buddhas of the past, future, and present are not open to me, but I know the drift of the Dhamma. Lord, it is as if there were a royal frontier city with mighty bastions and a mighty encircling wall in which was a single gate at which was a gatekeeper, wise, skilled, and clever, who kept out strangers and let in those he knew. And he, constantly patrolling and following along a path, might not see the joins and clefts in the bastion, even such as a cat might creep through. But whatever larger creatures entered or left the city must all go through this very gate. And it seems to me, Lord, that the drift of the Dhamma is the same. All those Arahant Buddhas of the past attained to supreme enlightenment by abandoning the 5 hindrances, defilements of mind that weaken understanding, having firmly established the 4 foundations of mindfulness in their minds, and realized the 7 factors of enlightenment as they really are. All the Arahant Buddhas of the future will attain enlightenment by abandoning the 5 hindrances, defilements of mind that weaken understanding, having firmly established the 4 foundations of mindfulness in their minds, and realize the 7 factors of awakening as they really are. And you, Lord, who are now the Arahant, fully enlightened Buddha, have also attained to supreme enlightenment by abandoning the 5 hindrances, defilements of mind that weaken understanding, having firmly established the 4 foundations of mindfulness in your mind, and realize the 7 factors of awakening as they really are. And that's the end of that part. The Buddha doesn't say anything in return, but this sutta is nice in that it shows the interconnection between the abandoning of the 5 hindrances, the developing of the 4 foundations of mindfulness, and the realization and the development of the 7 factors of enlightenment, that all these things are interconnected, and that the 5 hindrances have to be abandoned and overcome for the 7 factors of awakening to increase, and for one to realize liberation. So I think I'll read a little bit now from Bhante Ji's book. The Path of Serenity and Insight. So he's talking about samatha and vipassana, and sort of the whole range of meditation practices and the Buddha's teachings about the path of developing the mind. And chapter 3 in this book is called The Conquest of the Hindrances. A lot of the material in here he draws from the suttas. Some of it is from the commentary, and so you'll kind of hear maybe different terms or different presentations, but basically most of it seems very much based on the suttas, and is a good explanation of the hindrances and the context in which to understand them. So this is Bhante Ji. The jhanas are attained sequentially, mastery over each lower one being a prerequisite to the practice issuing in the next higher one. The attainment of any jhana comes about through a 2-sided process of development. On one side is the elimination of the states obstructive to it, on the other, the acquisition of states composing it. In the case of the first jhana, the factors of abandonment are the 5 hindrances, its factors of possession, the basic 5 jhana factors. Both are alluded to in the standard formulation for the first jhana. And so this would be from a sutta. Quite secluded from sense pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states of mind, he enters and dwells in the first jhana, which is accompanied by applied thought and sustained thought, with rapture and happiness born of seclusion. In this formula, the first part, the phrase, quite secluded from sense pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states of mind, refers to the elimination of the hindrances. The second part, mentioning the states found in the jhana, enumerates the factors of possession. The 5 hindrances. The 5 hindrances, in Pali, Pancha Nivarana, are sensual desire, ill will, sloth and torpor, restlessness and worry, and doubt. The defilements included in this set obstruct not only the first jhana, but the entire thrust of man's aspiration for liberation and enlightenment. They receive the name hindrances because they hinder and envelop the mind, preventing meditative development in the two spheres of serenity and insight. Hence the Buddha calls the 5 hindrances obstructions, hindrances, corruptions of the mind, weakeners of wisdom. Again he says, these 5 hindrances, monks, are causes of blindness, causes of loss of vision, causes of unknowing, opposed to wisdom, aligned with vexation, leading away from Nibbana. And that sutta is from the Samyutta Nikaya, chapter 5. We'll go on a little further. The elimination of the hindrances. Once the causal basis for the rise and growth of the hindrances becomes clear, the way to counteract and eliminate them follows as a matter of course. Since the hindrances occur in dependence on specific causes and conditions, their control and conquest require simply that their generative causes be removed. Though the actual achievement of such a stoppage may require diligent effort, it is the fundamental optimism of Buddhism that the qualities needed to overcome the hindrances are not beyond man's capacity for development, provided only that he is given the proper methodology. It is the purpose of the Buddha's discipline to provide precisely that methodology. The final eradication of the hindrances is effected exclusively by the 4 supramundane paths. Here what he's referring to is the 4 stages of awakening, or stream entry, once return, non-return, and arhatship. To reach the path, the development of insight is indispensable, since insight into the true characteristics of phenomena issues in the supramundane wisdom of the path. But in order for insight to arise, the hindrances have to be attenuated to a degree where they no longer disrupt the process of contemplation. So a point that he mentioned here that I thought to highlight is the presence of these terms that are the content of the 5 hindrances: sensual desire, ill will, sloth and torpor, restlessness and worry, and doubt. These being present both in the 5 hindrances category, but also in the category of the 10 fetters. And so what he's pointing to is that in the context of the 5 hindrances, these things, sensual desire, ill will, and the like, are hindering the mind from entering into samadhi, from going from the 7th factor of the Eightfold Path, right mindfulness, to the 8th factor, right tranquility, right concentration. So the hindrances are sort of the door that has to be, or you could say what has to be overcome, the obstacle that has to be overcome to attain samadhi and to attain jhana. But the same kilesas, the same root defilements that are in that way expressed as hindrances are also form the content of the 10 fetters. So I'll just read, there's a few suttas that discuss that. So you have the 10 fetters, which are in Pali the Sangyojana, and those are broken down into the lower fetters and the higher fetters. So this is the Anguttara Nikaya. The Buddha says, Bhikkhus, there are these 5 lower fetters. What 5? Personal existence view, doubt, wrong grasp of behavior and observances, sensual desire, and ill will. These are the 5 lower fetters. These 4 establishments of mindfulness are to be developed for abandoning these 5 lower fetters. Bhikkhus, these are the 5 higher fetters. What 5? Lust for form, lust for the formless, conceit, restlessness, and ignorance. These are the 5 higher fetters. These 4 establishments of mindfulness are to be developed for abandoning these 5 higher fetters. And then also in this collection of short suttas on the list of 5, the Buddha says, Bhikkhus, there are these 5 hindrances. What 5? The hindrance of sensual desire, the hindrance of ill will, the hindrance of dullness and drowsiness, the hindrance of restlessness and remorse, and the hindrance of doubt. These are the 5 hindrances. These 4 establishments of mindfulness are to be developed for abandoning these 5 hindrances. So as we see in the description of the 5 lower fetters and the 5 higher fetters, the elements of the 5 hindrances are found within those. So it brings up an interesting and important point that the 5 hindrances hinder the mind from entering into samadhi, but they're not totally overcome until the fetters of the samyojana are overcome. So with respect to the 5 lower fetters, in what Bhante Uji was calling the super-mundane paths, the 4 stages of awakening, what is the hindrance of doubt is one of the fetters in the lower fetters. And with stream entry, or the fruit of stream entry, doubt along with Sakaya Ditti, or self-view, and Silabhata Paramasa, or wrong grasp of behaviors and observances, doubt is cut off. So is, in that case, the samyojana, the fetter, is totally eradicated by the attainment of stream entry. And then with regards to the other 4 of the hindrances, in the path of fruition of once-returner, sensual desire and ill will are, etc., attenuated or markedly reduced in their power. But it isn't till it would either be the path of the fruition of non-returner, anagami, that sensual desire and ill will as a fetter are cut off. And so that would be 3 of the 5 hindrances. And then the remaining 2, restlessness and dullness and drowsiness, in the commentaries, they describe those as aspects of ignorance or aspects of confusion. And so those 2 aren't totally cut off until arahantship. So it's an interesting point that the hindrances have to be abandoned for the mind to settle, but the jhanas in and of themselves aren't enough to totally eradicate the hindrances. That's when the noble attainments which arise due to seeing the 4 noble truths, seeing the arising and passing away of all phenomena, those have to be present for the hindrances to be totally eradicated. So the last part I'll read from Bhante Ji's discussion on the conquest of the hindrances is his explanation of the section in the Satipatthana Sutta that we're kind of basing these readings off of, which is the contemplation of dhammas, contemplation of mind objects or dhamma categories in and of themselves as the 4th foundation of mindfulness. And he just talks about the context of that and how the contemplation of the hindrances, seeing them in and of themselves, seeing them arise, understanding how they arise, understanding how they cease, how that's an essential aspect of overcoming them. In the Satipatthana Sutta, the discourse on the foundations of mindfulness, The Buddha proposes a different approach to overcoming the hindrances. And he says different here in contrast to the approach of substitution that Ajahn Titapanyo mentioned, say substituting a subha practice for the arising of sensual desire, substituting metta for the presence of ill will, etc. So the Buddha proposes a different approach, a complementary approach, but slightly different in its nature. One which utilizes mindful observation of the hindrances themselves as a method for loosening their hold. This approach presupposes the same basic set of preliminaries observed in the gradual training: moral discipline, restraint of the senses, mindfulness and discernment, and contentment. However, instead of employing a variety of techniques to counteract the hindrances with the aim of reaching jhana, the method of mindfulness proceeds directly to the contemplation of mental and bodily phenomena with the aim of arousing insight. The diverse phenomena of body and mind are classified into 4 foundations of mindfulness: kaya, vedana, chitta, and dhamma, body feelings, states of mind, and mental objects. The confrontation with the hindrances enters into the last set, the contemplation of mental objects, or dhammanupassana, where it comes as the first exercise in this group. I'm quoting from a sutta. Herein, monks, a monk dwells contemplating mental objects in mental objects with regards to the 5 hindrances. And how does a monk dwell contemplating mental objects in mental objects with regards to the 5 hindrances? Herein, monks, when sensual desire is present in him, a monk understands, there is sensual desire in me. When there is no sensual desire present in him, he understands, there is no sensual desire present in me. He understands how unarisen sensual desire arises, how the arisen sensual desire is abandoned, and how the abandoned sensual desire does not arise again in the future. He understands the same with regard to ill will, sloth and torpor, restlessness and worry, and doubt. Since it is impossible for a meditator to completely avoid situations tending to provoke the hindrances into activity, he requires a technique which enables him to deal with them effectively at their causal level, to prevent them from arising if possible, or to eliminate them swiftly and surely if they should arise. Mindful observation provides him with just such a technique. Through bare attention to the hindrances, he is able to gain clear comprehension of their individual nature and to discern their causes and conditions. Contemplation of the hindrances is a means both to calm and insight. By directly facing each hindrance that presents itself, the meditator divests it of the destructive power it exercises when it escapes undetected. Repeated introspective self-examination, performed with complete sincerity, gives him the self-knowledge required to transform and purify the direction of his mental life. In this way, mindfulness of the hindrances becomes a means to the development of concentrated calm. The same contemplation, when directed towards the hindrances as bare instances of phenomena, exhibiting the universal features of phenomena, also becomes a means for gaining insight. By observing the rise and fall of the mental processes associated with the hindrances, the meditator gains insight into the fact of impermanence. By attending to their restless nature and disturbing effects, he sees the truth of suffering. And by viewing the hindrances as mere impersonal events, devoid of any substance or ego-oriented reference point, he comes to an appreciation of the truth of selflessness. If these insights are pursued and developed to the deeper levels they imply, they could even issue in the attainment of the supermundane path. In this way, the method of mindfulness is able to transform even obstacles to meditation into integral parts of the meditative process. So, it's just interesting that there's many different techniques to deal with the hindrances, and that if you look at the suttas, it's definitely the case that the purpose and the goal of practice of the four foundations of mindfulness, practice of right mindfulness, really the objective that it has is in overcoming the hindrances. And is the sutta that was read yesterday about the 5 methods for dealing with distracting thought, that offers useful methods. But this last method in the Satipatthana Sutta itself, just the contemplations of the hindrances, seeing their arising and seeing their cessation, is also an important one to keep in mind. So I'll read a couple suttas from the Anguttara Nikaya that discuss the 5 hindrances and their role in overcoming them in the path and different things related to them. So this is the Book of the Tens, Chapter 2, Sutta 12, 5 factors. Bhikkhus, a bhikkhu who has abandoned 5 factors and possesses 5 factors is called, in this Dhamma and discipline, a supreme person who is consummate and has completely lived the spiritual life. And how has a bhikkhu abandoned 5 factors? Here, a bhikkhu has abandoned sensual desire, ill will, dullness and drowsiness, restlessness and remorse, and doubt. It is in this way that a bhikkhu has abandoned 5 factors. And how does a bhikkhu possess 5 factors? Here, a bhikkhu possesses the aggregate of virtue, the aggregate of virtuous behavior of one beyond training, the aggregate of concentration of one beyond training, the aggregate of wisdom of one beyond training, the aggregate of liberation of one beyond training, and the aggregate of knowledge and vision of liberation of one beyond training. It is in this way that a bhikkhu possesses 5 factors. When a bhikkhu has abandoned these 5 factors and possesses these 5 factors, he is called, in this Dhamma and discipline, a supreme person who is consummate and complete in living the spiritual life. When sensual desire and ill will, dullness and drowsiness, restlessness and doubt are totally absent in a bhikkhu. When one like this possesses the virtue and concentration of one beyond training, and similar the liberation and knowledge, possessing 5 factors and having removed 5 factors, he is truly called a consummate one in this Dhamma and discipline. So that sutta is talking about a very lofty state of practice, possibly referring to the Arhat. And the next sutta I'd like to read is a little bit longer, and it sort of goes into a detailed presentation of the gradual training of how to get there. You'll see this teaching in different places. It's sort of a repeated sequence cropping up in different suttas. That's maybe the longer, called something like the longer presentation of the gradual training. So I'll read a little bit from it here, probably skipping forward in some places to abbreviate it slightly. Here, bhikkhus, the Tathagata arises in the world, an arhat, perfectly enlightened, accomplished in true knowledge and conduct, fortunate, knower of the world, unsurpassed trainer of persons to be tamed, teacher of devas and humans, the enlightened one, the blessed one. He teaches the Dhamma that is good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end. With the right meaning and phrasing, he reveals the perfectly complete and pure spiritual life. A householder or a householder's son or one born in some other clan hears the Dhamma. He then acquires faith in the Tathagata and considers thus: household life is cramped and dusty, life gone forth is wide open. It is not easy while living at home to lead the spiritual life that is utterly perfect and pure as a polished conch shell. Suppose I shave off my hair and beard, put on ochre robes, and go forth from the household life into homelessness. Having thus gone forth and possessing the bhikkhu's training and way of life, having abandoned the destruction of life, he abstains from the destruction of life. Having abandoned the taking of what is not given, he abstains from taking what is not given. Having abandoned false speech, he abstains from false speech. He speaks truth, adheres to truth. He is trustworthy and reliable, no deceiver of the world. Having abandoned divisive speech, he abstains from divisive speech. Having abandoned harsh speech, he speaks words that are gentle, pleasing to the ear, lovable, words that go to the heart, courteous words that are desired by many people and agreeable to many people. Having abandoned idle chatter, he abstains from idle chatter. He speaks at a proper time, speaks what is truthful, speaks what is beneficial, speaks on the Dhamma and discipline. At the proper time, he speaks such words as are worth recording, reasonable, succinct, and beneficial. He is content with robes to protect his body and alms food to maintain his stomach, and wherever he goes, he sets out taking only these with him. Just as a bird, wherever it goes, flies with its wings as its only burdened, so too, a bhikkhu is content with robes to protect his body and alms food to maintain his stomach, and wherever he goes, he sets out taking only these with him. Possessing this aggregate of noble, virtuous behavior, he experiences blameless bliss within himself. Having seen a form with the eye, he does not grasp at its marks and features. Since, if he left the eye faculty unrestrained, bad, unwholesome states of longing and dejection might invade him. He practices restraint over it. He guards the eye faculty. He undertakes the restraint of the eye faculty. And so on with the ear, nose, tongue, tactile sense, and the mind. Possessing this noble restraint of the faculties, he experiences unsullied bliss within himself. He acts with clear comprehension when going forward and returning. He acts with clear comprehension while looking ahead and looking away. He acts with clear comprehension when bending and stretching his limbs. He acts with clear comprehension when wearing his robes and carrying his outer robe and bowl. And he acts with clear comprehension when walking, standing, sitting, falling asleep, waking up, talking, and keeping silent. Possessing this aggregate of noble virtuous behavior, and this noble restraint of the faculties, and this noble mindfulness and clear comprehension, he resorts to a secluded lodging, the forest, the root of a tree, a mountain, a ravine, a hillside cave, a charnel ground, a jungle thicket, an open space, a heap of straw. After his meal, on returning from his alms round, he sits down, folding his legs crosswise, straightening his body and establishing mindfulness in front of him. Having abandoned longing for the world, he dwells with the mind free from longing. He purifies his mind from longing. Having abandoned ill will and hatred, he dwells with the mind free from ill will. Compassionate toward all beings, he purifies his mind from ill will and hatred. Having abandoned dullness and drowsiness, he dwells free from dullness and drowsiness. Percipient of light, mindful and clearly comprehending, he purifies his mind from dullness and drowsiness. Having abandoned restlessness and remorse, he dwells without agitation, with a mind inwardly peaceful. Having abandoned doubt, he dwells, having gone beyond doubt, unperplexed about wholesome qualities, he purifies his mind from doubt. Having thus abandoned these 5 hindrances, defilements of the mind, qualities that weaken wisdom, secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states, he enters and dwells in the first jhana, which consists of rapture and pleasure born of seclusion, accompanied by thought and examination. And so on to the four jhanas. When his mind has been concentrated in this way, purified, cleansed, unblemished, rid of defilement, malleable, wieldy, steady, and attained to imperturbability, he directs it to goes on to describe the 6 psychic powers. And last, to the knowledge of the destruction of the taints. He understands as it really is, this is suffering. He understands as it really is, this is the origin of suffering. He understands as it really is, this is the cessation of suffering. He understands as it really is, this is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. He understands as it really is, these are the taints, the asavas. He understands as it really is, this is the origin of the taints. He understands as it really is, this is the cessation of the taints. He understands as it really is, this is the way leading to the cessation of the taints. When he knows and sees thus, his mind is liberated from the taint of sensuality, from the taint of existence, and from the taint of ignorance. When it is liberated, there comes a knowledge it is liberated, and he understands, destroys his birth, the spiritual life has been lived, what had to be done has been done, there is no more coming back to any state of being. So that is the somewhat abbreviated, I skipped ahead in various places, but the longer presentation on the gradual training, and it shows the place that the overcoming of the 5 hindrances has before the attainment of the jhanas, but it's also an important presentation of the Dhamma as well, because it shows how the overcoming of the hindrances is based on a lot of other important factors, such as having pure sila, having restraint of the sense faculties, having mindfulness and clear comprehension, and pursuing sort of secluded places for practice. So I think that's enough reading for today. Got a few minutes where if there's any questions, people could ask them now. Questions or comments?
I'm wondering if you could just talk about like perception of light at its own time, dispel and stop and cover.
It's a good one. I've wondered about that myself. And I think it's something related to the brightness of the mind. Like, you could kind of understand that more figuratively, perhaps, that dullness and drowsiness, the mind is sort of dark, clouded, muddled, So the states of the jhanas and sort of the higher states of mind are all, described, and it's somewhat figuratively in ways of brightness, there being light, there being vision. So definitely you can think about it in that way. As far as like literal light appearing in nimittas and stuff like that, there is, you do hear about that from time to time. I would maybe defer to Ajahn Kuradama for what you think about the percipient of light description there.
Yeah, I just, my understanding from what's in the sutras and also just general teachings from various meditation teachers is kind of both, just what you said, the internal kind of mental quality of brightness is certainly something that one can use, just bringing up that energy in the body and in the mind that gives a sense of brightening, mental brightening, uplift, alertness. And that's, essentially what you're looking for, to help overcome some of these hindrances anyway, particularly ones of sloth and torpor. That's the end result. I also think that there are enough references to, and teachings that I've heard about actually using light, the actual visual experience of light, whether it's, in its more available factors as like light around you, like some people will use the flame of a candle to stare at to help bring energy and dispel drowsiness, and it seems to be effective for some people. And also the actual visual, establishing a mental perception of visual light, which takes a little bit more practice and experience, but it's also possible, like you're feeling tired and drowsy, and your eyes are closed, bringing up like an image of the sun or just white bright light as a mental image, and allowing your attention to kind of absorb into that as a brightening factor. But again, with the purpose of establishing that brightness of the mind that's more of an energetic uplift, and to dispel the sloth and torpor. That's my understanding anyway of Ajahn Chendo's code.
I was going to say exactly the same thing. Because I sometimes will imagine the sun, and that's very awakening for me. So I just like imagine staring into the sun. It's just very bright, and that changes the whole kind of darkening experience. But also people will, as such, if you notice, I will shine a flashlight in their face. I've done that before. You know, if you have a kind of a, you know, these new LEDs are quite nice. So they actually, even if your eyes are closed, it's very bright. So I found those actually both effective with the eyes open or closed, with a flashlight or just the simplest thing when drowsiness occurs is just open your eyes, period. Because also just testing out that sense is to know, like when you are meditating and you open your eyes, if you immediately, or not even immediately, just within a few moments, minutes, start, actually feel like you can't keep your eyes open, well then you're stuck in torpor. So there needs to be because some people might not know that. They just are sort of, you can even tell them after meditation, you were like, your head was almost flat on the floor. Oh no, I was quite awake. I was really a recipient of light. Okay, so it's really like just opening the eyes is really helpful. That there's usually some light in the room or something, so it's quite helpful. I can't remember one of the things I thought was interesting. They were comparing the hindrances and the abeyance of the hindrances, and then with the jhanas, that the jhanas are incapable with the abeyance of the hindrances. But then once one comes out of it, then they come right back. But then as an arahant, those are also clear. So one doesn't. So it's sort of like this sense that you get a flavor of arahantship through the jhanas, which I think the Buddha has talked about how you, and then that actually is quite inspiring along the path. So one gets that, and it's like they have so much sattva faith that can arise just out of that experience. So it's quite a special. It's not like a stream enter, like I think the same as a glimpse of nibbana, but it's like a flavor, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was a sutta, I didn't flag it, but it's in the Anguttara Nikaya where the Buddha does say that basically the four jhanas can be called like an experience of nibbana in this very life, or something like that.
Like a sign or something.
Yeah. And insofar as the hindrances are totally absent in them.
Sort of like the distinction with the terms Chaita Vimutti and Panya Vimutti, where Vimutti means just like release, or sometimes liberation, people say, but release. But Chaita Vimutti is that experience of release based on, samadhi.
And that
versus Panya Vimutti, which is release, which is more, the real release, the real, lasting release based on insight, wisdom. And
in that case of Chaita Vimutti, that could be defined as the jhanas, or also like the Brahma Viharas.
Yes, it's not defined as those, but it's referring to the release that comes from concentration, samadhi, jhana, and also expanded states like the Brahma Viharas. It's the quality of the release from experience.
And like temporary release, basically. It's stated that it's temporary.
When it's based on those factors.
That's interesting.
Yeah. The other quick thing that we're at 10:30, but you didn't mention, I don't know if you didn't get to Ajahn Jeff today. I don't know if it was in, because Ajahn Jeff talks a lot about the term bare awareness, bare attention, which was referred to in Bhante Ji's reading.
That's true,
I didn't know if that was what you were going to read, but he takes quite an objection, he makes quite an objection to the use of
That's true,
that term, so I thought it was just useful to qualify, if people are, the use of that term bare attention. Ajahn Jeff objects to that when it's used to mean like, not doing anything, like just kind of like sitting there, mindful of a state of mind, and even if it's an unskillful state of mind or something with a hindrance, like you're mindful of a hindrance, he interprets people using that term bare attention as meaning not responding, not doing anything, not taking any, action to release oneself from the experience. But I think that, say, Bhante G, my reading into it, without knowing for sure, is that Bhante G, maybe others, don't use it in quite the same way that Ajahn Jeff might object to people using it. That they use it more as like a non-judgmental, so that when that when that attention to an object that's unskillful arises, the tendency is for people to want to not have to deal with it or to ignore it by using bare attention. It's like, oh, okay, well, anger's arising here, and I don't know. All I need to do is just know that I don't need to do anything about it. But that it's more like, I interpret it as saying non-judgmental, meaning you're not going to try and push it away or ignore it, but you're seeing it with non-judgmentalness, with that bare attention, meaning not being judgmental about it to the point where you want to just avoid it, get rid of it, or react against it, but you see it clearly and then take an appropriate response to it. And I think that came out in actually Bhante G's way he describes it. Once you've seen it through bare attention, then you take the appropriate measure. And maybe it's just noticing it's arising and it's ceasing, but doing that with clarity and not judgmentalism. So anyway, I just brought that up because the word bare attention, Ajahn Jeff will, speak quite strongly against using that as a term. He says there is no such thing as bare attention. It's either inappropriate or appropriate.
Right. Yeah, I guess using the word appropriate attention would be more useful.
I think that's the same, like with bare awareness. Is that. But I mean, also
it's a little bit different. But
the criticism around that also is similar. But I think also you can use the word broad, which sometimes means you're not. Sometimes the attention or the awareness is too acute. It's just too narrow. So then I think that's another aspect of it that's actually skillful. But there's another take on that also in the way that it's described by like in the Vipassana world.
Like choiceless awareness when it comes into that kind of as Luang Por would describe the use of the words choiceless awareness for some people as nebulous, going into a state of nebulous nothingness.
Spacey awareness.
It's spacey awareness.
I think the interesting maybe the important point in the Satipatthana Sutta when it discusses that, it's like awareness to see how they arise and how they cease, but then also how arisen hindrances can be brought to cessation, or how they arose, what conditioned them, but then how they can be brought to cessation, how they can be prevented from arising, how they not going to arise in the first place. So it's like,
which is a very active process. It's not inaction.
All right. Well, that's probably good for today. It's 10:35.